On a gray morning in February 2003, in a small town nestled in the rolling hills of North Carolina, a woman named Michelle Fisher vanished from her home while her husband was at work and her 5-year-old son was at school. When the boy returned that afternoon, he found the front door hanging open, his mother's car still in the driveway, her purse on the kitchen counter. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Investigators would search for weeks. They would drag ponds and comb through forests. They would interview neighbors and friends and family members. But Michelle Fisher had disappeared as completely as if she had never existed at all. The case would go cold for more than a decade, filed away in boxes in a storage room at the sheriff's department. Another unsolved mystery in a county that had seen too many. But the truth, as it so often does, was waiting in the one place no one thought to look, in the memory of a child who had been told to forget. What happens when the only witness to a crime is too young to speak, and by the time he can, no one is listening? The town of Randleman sits in the heart of Randolph County, North Carolina, a place where textile mills once hummed through the night and tobacco fields stretched toward distant tree lines. By 2003, many of those mills had shuttered their doors, leaving behind skeleton crews and empty parking lots. The town had that particular quality of small southern communities that have known better days, where the Methodist Church still draws a Sunday crowd, and the high school football games remain the social event of the week. Main Street had a diner that served biscuits until 2 in the afternoon, a hardware store that had been there since 1947, and a post office where everyone knew everyone else's business before the mail was even sorted. Michelle Fisher was 28 years old that winter, a slender woman with brown hair she usually pulled back in a ponytail, and a quick smile that people remembered. She had grown up 2 counties over, met her husband David at a church picnic when she was 19, and married him 6 months later. Those who knew her said she was quiet, the type of person who listened more than she spoke, who volunteered at the elementary school library on Tuesday mornings, and made casseroles for families when someone passed or fell ill. She worked part-time at a dentist's office in Asheboro, filing insurance claims and answering phones. Her son, Tyler, had just turned 5 in January. He was small for his age, with his mother's brown eyes and a habit of humming to himself when he played with his toy cars. The Fisher family lived in a rental house on the eastern edge of town, a single-story brick ranch with white shutters and a carport. The yard was small but neat, with a swing set that David had assembled the previous spring, and a garden plot where Michelle had tried to grow tomatoes with limited success. The street was quiet, lined with similar houses occupied mostly by young families and retirees. Dogs barked at passing cars. Children rode bicycles in lazy circles. It was the kind of neighborhood where people waved from their porches and borrowed cups of sugar and kept an eye on things. On the morning of February 14th, a Friday, the sky was the color of cement. The temperature hovered just above freezing, and a thin wind rattled the bare branches of the oak trees that lined the street. Michelle woke at 6:30, as she did every weekday, and made coffee in the kitchen while David showered. Tyler was still asleep, curled beneath his dinosaur comforter in the small bedroom at the back of the house. She packed her husband's lunch, a turkey sandwich and an apple and a bag of chips, the same thing she packed every day. David worked as a shift supervisor at a furniture manufacturing plant 20 miles away in High Point. He left the house at 7:15, kissing Michelle on the cheek as he always did, telling her he would be home around 6. Michelle woke Tyler at 7:30. She helped him dress in jeans and a red sweatshirt, tied his shoes, and combed his hair while he squirmed and complained. They ate cereal at the kitchen table, Cheerios with sliced banana, and she reminded him that he had show and tell that afternoon and asked if he wanted to bring his toy fire truck. He nodded, chewing slowly, already half asleep again. She drove him to Randleman Elementary School at 8:20, watching in the rearview mirror as he walked toward the building with his backpack bouncing against his small shoulders. Then she drove back home, The clock on the dashboard read 8:37. She was supposed to work that afternoon, her shift starting at 1. She had the morning to herself, a few hours to clean the house and maybe run to the grocery store. According to her planner, which investigators would later find on the kitchen counter, she had written laundry and call mom on the page for February 14th. Her mother, who lived in Greensboro, would later tell police that Michelle never called. At 11:45, a neighbor named Dorothy Chambers glanced out her kitchen window and saw Michelle's car still in the driveway. She thought nothing of it at the time. At 12:30, the dentist's office called the house. No one answered. At 2 o'clock, they called again. Still no answer. At 2:15, the office manager called David at the plant. David Fisher left work immediately. He arrived home at approximately 3:10 in the afternoon. Tyler's school bus dropped him off at 3:20. The boy walked up the driveway and found his father standing in the open doorway, staring into the house. David had already called the police. Deputies from the Randolph County Sheriff's Department arrived within minutes. They found no signs of forced entry, no evidence of a struggle, no blood or disturbed furniture. Michelle's purse was on the counter, her wallet inside, $43 in cash untouched. Her keys hung on the hook by the door. Her coat was draped over a chair. The coffee pot was still half full, cold now but clearly made that morning. In the bedroom, the bed was made. In the bathroom, her toothbrush stood in its holder. The laundry basket was full of clean clothes waiting to be folded. Clear's throat. The only thing that seemed out of place was the silence. The house felt empty in a way that went beyond absence. It felt evacuated, as if someone had stepped out of their body and left the shell behind. The search began before dark. Deputies fanned out across the neighborhood, knocking on doors, asking questions. Had anyone seen Michelle that morning? Had anyone heard anything unusual? Dorothy Chambers remembered seeing the car in the driveway. A man 3 houses down said he had been working in his garage all morning and had not noticed anything strange. A woman across the street said she had taken her dog for a walk around 10, and the neighborhood had been quiet. No one had seen Michelle Fisher since her husband left for work at 7:15 that morning. By nightfall, volunteers had gathered at the elementary school parking lot. The local fire department organized search teams. The high school football coach brought flashlights. Church groups arrived with thermoses of coffee and sandwiches wrapped in foil. The temperature dropped into the 20s as darkness fell, and the searchers moved through the woods behind the neighborhood, calling Michelle's name, their voices thin in the cold air. They walked the streets with flashlights, checking ditches and culverts. They searched the banks of the creek that ran through the town park. They found nothing. David Fisher stood in his front yard, speaking with deputies, answering the same questions again and again. What time had he left that morning? What had Michelle been wearing? Had they argued recently? Was she unhappy? Did she have any reason to leave? He answered calmly, his hands in his pockets, his expression blank. He said they had not argued. He said she seemed fine that morning. He said he had no idea where she might be. Those who knew him said he seemed strangely composed for a man whose wife had vanished. He did not cry. He did not raise his voice. He stood very still and spoke in complete sentences, and did not ask the questions a worried husband might ask. Tyler Fisher was interviewed briefly that evening by a deputy trained in speaking with children. The boy sat in the living room with a juice box and told the deputy that his mother had taken him to school that morning. He said she had promised to make spaghetti for dinner. He said he did not know where she was now. The deputy asked if Tyler had seen anyone at the house that morning, anyone his mother had talked to, or anyone who had come to the door. The boy shook his head. He said he had been at school all day. He said his teacher had read them a story about a dog. When asked if he was worried about his mother, he looked down at his hands and did not answer. The investigation moved quickly at first. Detectives from the sheriff's department interviewed Michelle's coworkers, her friends, her family members. They pulled her phone records and found nothing unusual, mostly calls to her mother and the dentist's office. They checked her bank accounts and credit cards. No transactions had been made after the morning of February 14th. They searched the woods surrounding the town, expanding the radius each day. Cadaver dogs were brought in. Helicopters flew grid patterns over the county. Divers searched the murky water of ponds and creeks. The searches turned up old tires and rusted shopping carts and beer cans and nothing else. The media arrived by the end of the first week. A reporter from the Greensboro News and Record wrote a front-page story about the missing mother. A local television station ran a segment showing Michelle's photograph, a picture from the previous summer in which she smiled at the camera, sunlight in her hair. The station set up a tip line. Calls came in from across the state. People reported seeing a woman matching Michelle's description at a gas station in Raleigh, at a rest stop near the Virginia border, at a motel in Charlotte. Every lead was followed. Every sighting was investigated. None of them led anywhere. As the days became weeks, investigators turned their attention more closely to the family. They re-interviewed David Fisher, this time at the sheriff's department, recording the conversation. They asked about his marriage, his finances, his whereabouts on the morning of February 14th. He repeated what he had already told them. He had left for work at 7:15. He had clocked in at the plant at 7:52. His coworkers confirmed seeing him throughout the day. His time card showed no gaps. He had been at work when his wife disappeared. The timeline seemed airtight, but there were small things that did not fit. Deputies whispered quietly among themselves about the way David had described his wife in past tense during one of the early interviews, catching himself and correcting to present tense. They noted that he had not cried, not once, not even when the television cameras were rolling. They observed that he seemed more annoyed than distraught, as if Michelle's disappearance were an inconvenience rather than a tragedy. One detective wrote in his notes, "Husband remains unusually calm, affect flat, does not ask about search efforts or next steps, answers questions but volunteers nothing." A search warrant was obtained for the Fisher home. Investigators spent 2 days going through the house room by room. They took samples from the drains. They examined the carpet with luminol looking for traces of blood. They checked the walls for signs of violence. They found nothing. The house was clean, almost obsessively so. There were no hidden diaries, no secret letters, no evidence of an affair or financial trouble or any reason Michelle might have had to disappear on her own. Her clothes were still in the closet. Her medications were still in the bathroom cabinet. Everything suggested she had planned to return. Clear's throat. Investigators also looked more carefully at David's vehicle, a blue Ford pickup truck. The odometer showed consistent mileage for his daily commute. The truck was clean inside, no signs of recent deep cleaning, no unusual dirt or debris. They took samples from the truck bed and found nothing of interest. The vehicle yielded no secrets. By mid-March, the case had begun to slow. The searches had covered hundreds of acres. The interviews had been exhausted. The leads had dried up. Michelle Fisher had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only questions and a 5-year-old boy who hummed to himself and rarely spoke about his mother. The case remained open, but the daily urgency faded. Investigators moved on to other cases, other emergencies, other families in crisis. The boxes of evidence were filed away. The case went cold. 3 months after Michelle's disappearance, David Fisher moved out of the rental house. He told neighbors he could not stand to live there anymore, surrounded by memories. He found a 2-bedroom apartment in Asheboro, closer to his work, and enrolled Tyler in a new school. The boy adjusted quietly, as children do, slipping into a new routine. David hired a babysitter, a woman from his church, to watch Tyler after school. He worked his shifts and came home and made simple dinners, hot dogs and macaroni and cheese. He did not speak about Michelle. When Tyler asked where his mother was, David told him she had gone away and would not be coming back. The boy stopped asking. For those who have ever doubted someone you love, who have felt the slow creep of suspicion and told yourself you were imagining things. The months and years that followed Michelle Fisher's disappearance held a particular kind of torment. David's sister, Corinne, visited the apartment in Asheboro several times that first year. She would later tell investigators that something felt wrong, though she could not articulate exactly what. David seemed fine, she said, maybe too fine. He did not mourn. He did not keep pictures of Michelle on the walls. He did not mention her name unless someone else brought it up first. When Corinne tried to talk about Michelle, tried to keep her sister-in-law's memory alive for Tyler's sake, David changed the subject. Tyler was 6, then 7, then 8. He was a quiet child, small and watchful. Teachers described him as well-behaved but withdrawn, a boy who ate lunch alone and did not raise his hand in class. He drew pictures sometimes, intricate scenes with houses and trees and people. The school counselor noted that many of his drawings included a figure lying on the ground, often colored red. When asked about the drawings, Tyler said he did not remember making them. He had nightmares, his father told the babysitter, but David did not take him to a therapist. He said the boy would outgrow it. In 2006, 3 years after Michelle's disappearance, David began dating a woman named Jennifer who worked at the furniture plant. She moved into the apartment 6 months later. Tyler was 8 years old. Jennifer was kind to him, or tried to be, but the boy remained distant. He spent hours in his room, playing with toy cars, lining them up in precise rows. He did not call Jennifer by any name. He looked through her as if she were not there. The relationship lasted 2 years before Jennifer left. She told her sister, who would later speak to investigators, that David was cold, emotionally absent, impossible to reach. She said Tyler gave her nightmares. She said the boy would stand in doorways and stare at her, not blinking, not speaking. She said once she had asked Tyler if he missed his mother, and the boy had looked at her for a long moment before saying, "Daddy said not to talk about her." When Jennifer asked David about it, he told her to mind her own business. By 2010, 7 years after Michelle Fisher vanished, the case had been all but forgotten except by those who had known her. Her mother, living alone in Greensboro, kept Michelle's photograph on the mantle and called the sheriff's department twice a year to ask if there had been any progress. The answer was always the same. There were no new leads. The case remained open. They had not given up hope, but the words rang hollow. Michelle Fisher had become a statistic, another missing person in a country where thousands vanish every year. Tyler was 12 years old that year, in 7th grade, taller now but still thin and quiet. He had developed a habit of chewing his fingernails until they bled. The school counselor recommended therapy. David declined. He said the boy was fine, just shy. If you have noticed a child who seems to carry the weight of something too heavy for their small shoulders, who flinches at raised voices and goes still when adults argue, you will understand what Tyler Fisher had become. He was a boy living in the shadow of a secret he did not fully understand, a memory that surfaced in dreams and sank again before he woke. In March 2014, 11 years after his mother disappeared, Tyler Fisher was 15 years old. He was living with his father in a different apartment, a smaller place on the outskirts of Asheboro. David had been laid off from the furniture plant the previous year and was working part-time at a hardware store. Money was tight. The apartment was cramped. Father and son moved around each other like strangers, speaking only when necessary. On the afternoon of March 22nd, Tyler got into an argument with his father over something small, a chore left undone or a curfew broken. David raised his voice. Tyler, for the first time anyone could remember, raised his back. He told his father he was tired of lying. He said he was tired of pretending. David told him to go to his room. Tyler said, "You know what you did." The argument escalated. Neighbors in the adjacent apartment later reported hearing shouting, a door slamming, the sound of something breaking. Tyler left the apartment and walked to a friend's house. The friend's mother, A woman named Patricia Lawson noticed immediately that something was wrong. Tyler was shaking, his face pale, his eyes red. She asked if he was all right. He said he needed to tell someone something. He said he had been keeping a secret for too long. Patricia Lawson called the police. A deputy arrived within 20 minutes. Tyler Fisher, sitting at the Lawson family's kitchen table with a glass of water he did not drink, told the deputy that he knew what had happened to his mother. He said he had been there. He said his father had told him never to speak about it, had told him that if he ever said anything, terrible things would happen. The deputy asked Tyler to start from the beginning. The boy took a breath. He said he was 5 years old when his mother disappeared, but he remembered that morning. He said he had not been at school. According to Tyler's statement, given that evening at the Randolph County Sheriff's Department and later, repeated in more formal interviews with trained forensic specialists, he had woken up on the morning of February 14, 2003, before his mother had intended to wake him. He had heard voices in the kitchen, his parents arguing. His mother was crying. His father was angry. Tyler had stayed in his bed, afraid to come out. The argument had grown louder. He heard his father say, "I'm done with this." He heard his mother say, "Please don't." Then there was silence. Tyler said he got out of bed and walked down the hallway. He said he saw his mother lying on the kitchen floor. She was not moving. His father was standing over her. David Fisher looked up and saw his son standing in the doorway. Tyler said his father's face changed, became very calm. David told the boy to go back to his room and get dressed. He said they were going on a trip. He said if Tyler was a good boy and did exactly what he was told, everything would be fine. Tyler Fisher, 5 years old, did what he was told. He went back to his room. He got dressed. When he came back to the kitchen, his mother was not there anymore. His father had rolled something up in a blanket and carried it out to the truck. Tyler watched through the living room window. David put the bundle in the truck bed and covered it with a tarp. Then he came back inside and cleaned the kitchen floor. Tyler remembered the smell of bleach. He remembered his father scrubbing hard, breathing heavily. David Fisher drove his son to school that morning. Tyler said his father told him in the truck that his mother had gone away. He said she was not coming back. He said Tyler must never tell anyone what he had seen, because if he did, bad things would happen. He said people would blame Tyler. He said they would take Tyler away. The boy, small and terrified and confused, believed him. When David dropped him off at school, Tyler walked into the building and said nothing. He sat through show and tell. He ate lunch in the cafeteria. He rode the bus home and found his father waiting. For 11 years, Tyler Fisher kept the secret. He was too young to understand what he had witnessed. He was too afraid to speak. His father reinforced the silence with occasional reminders, small comments that kept the boy's fear fresh. "Remember what I told you," David would say, and Tyler would remember. The memory became something buried, something he could almost pretend had not happened. But it surfaced in his drawings. It surfaced in his nightmares. It surfaced in the way he flinched when his father raised his voice. Clear as throat, the case reopened immediately. Detectives who had worked the original investigation, some now retired, were called back in to consult. Tyler's statement was analyzed by psychologists specializing in child testimony and memory. The consensus was that the boy was telling the truth as he remembered it. There were details in his account that matched the original scene, things a child could not have fabricated. He described the layout of the old house with accuracy. He remembered the smell of bleach. He remembered the pattern on the blanket. On April 3, 2014, David Fisher was arrested at the hardware store where he worked. He was taken into custody without incident. When detectives informed him that they were reopening the investigation into Michelle's disappearance based on new testimony, David asked if Tyler had talked. The detectives did not answer. David Fisher said nothing else. He requested a lawyer. The search for Michelle Fisher's remains began again, this time with Tyler's testimony to guide it. The boy remembered his father driving for a long time that morning, remembered trees and dirt roads. He remembered stopping near water. A search focused on rural areas within a 30-mile radius of Randleman, places with ponds or creeks, places accessible by truck. Investigators used cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar. They interviewed hunters and landowners, asking if they remembered anything unusual in February 2003. In late May 2014, remains were discovered in a wooded area near the Deep River, roughly 25 miles south of Randleman. The bones were partially buried, wrapped in remnants of deteriorated fabric. Dental records confirmed the remains were those of Michelle Fisher. She had been there for 11 years, hidden beneath leaves and earth in silence. The medical examiner determined cause of death to be blunt force trauma to the head. The forensic analysis suggested she had been struck multiple times. The media descended on Randolph County once again. The case that had gone cold was now front-page news. Headlines read, "Son's testimony solves decade-old mystery," and "Father arrested in wife's murder after 11 years." Television crews set up outside the courthouse. Reporters interviewed neighbors who remembered the case, who remembered Michelle Fisher and her quiet smile. The community was divided. Some people had always suspected David Fisher. Others were shocked, insisting they had known him for years and he had seemed like a normal man, a decent father. David Fisher pleaded not guilty. His defense attorney argued that Tyler's testimony was unreliable, the product of false memories implanted over years of confusion and anger toward his father. The attorney pointed out that Tyler had been only 5 years old at the time, and that childhood memories are notoriously unreliable. He argued that the physical evidence was inconclusive, that the remains had been too degraded to determine exactly what had happened or when. The prosecution countered with Tyler's detailed testimony, given over multiple interviews and consistent across each telling. They presented evidence of David's behavior in the days and weeks after Michelle's disappearance, his lack of emotion, his failure to cooperate fully with the investigation. They presented the remains, the location consistent with Tyler's memory. They presented expert testimony on the nature of traumatic childhood memory, explaining that while details might fade, core memories of traumatic events are often retained with surprising accuracy. The trial began in February 2015, almost exactly 12 years after Michelle Fisher vanished. Tyler Fisher, now 16 years old, took the stand. He wore a button-down shirt that was slightly too big for him. He spoke quietly, looking down at his hands. When asked to describe what he remembered from the morning of February 14, 2003, he said, "I remember my dad standing over my mom. I remember her not moving. I remember him telling me not to tell." His voice broke. He said, "I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner." The courtroom was silent except for the sound of someone crying softly. David Fisher sat at the defense table, his expression unchanged. He did not look at his son. The jury deliberated for 3 days. On February 28, 2015, they returned a verdict of guilty on charges of second-degree murder. David Fisher was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 20 years. When the judge asked if he had anything to say, David Fisher stood and said, "I have nothing to say." He was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. Tyler Fisher watched him go. In the months that followed, Tyler moved in with his maternal grandmother in Greensboro. He enrolled in a new school and began therapy. He started speaking about his mother, about the memories he had buried for so long. He visited her grave, a simple marker in a cemetery outside Randleman, and left flowers. Those close to him said he was beginning to heal slowly, the way all deep wounds heal, with time and care, and the knowledge that the truth had finally been told. The case of Michelle Fisher closed with her husband's conviction, but the questions it raised remain. How does a 5-year-old child carry a secret that heavy? What does it cost to stay silent when speaking might save you? How do we recognize the signs of trauma in children who have learned to hide their pain? The answers are not simple. But Michelle Fisher's story reminds us that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of surfacing. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it takes a child finding the courage to speak. But it surfaces. Michelle Fisher was 28 years old when she died. She will not see her son graduate from high school or college. She will not walk him down the aisle or hold her grandchildren. But she is not forgotten. In Randleman, there is a bench in the town park with a plaque that bears her name. In Greensboro, her mother keeps her photograph on the mantle, next to pictures of Tyler, who has her eyes and her quiet strength. And in a courtroom in Randolph County, there is a transcript of a boy's testimony, words that finally gave his mother justice. If this story mattered to you, subscribe and hit the bell. Share the episode. Someone somewhere may still be waiting to be heard. The truth is patient. It will wait as long as it takes, but it will not stay buried forever.